And so when I look at a company, they're looking usually from where they're at with their business rather than looking at a vision of what they would could become.
Welcome to Game Changer, where you get the inside track to win in a decade of disruption. We're all about winning together, so don't get left behind. Be sure to subscribe and let's crush this business unusual game together. Today, we're talking to Howard Lim. He's the founder of How Creative, a successful international marketing firm that blends the science and art of business success. So you're going to want to stay tuned all the way through because I know that Howard's got some awesome game-changing insights to share with us, all about igniting profits and increasing your company's value. He's known as the business and brand architect. Howard designs brands that are difficult to duplicate. So Howard, it's an absolute privilege and pleasure to have you on the show today and loving your shirt.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let's start off with a more personal question, Howard. What would you say is your own personal game changer difference that has made such a difference in terms of just the way you live your life, the magic you've created in your companies, the magic you've helped other people create in their companies? What would you say that special difference is?
The special difference is really what influenced me was the age of the computer being able to be used by anybody as long as they're willing to adapt to it. So the early ages of the digital revolution, just seeing the possibilities, the endless possibilities of being aided by technology, specifically with the computer and everything that we do in life.
That's such an interesting answer. I wasn't expecting that. So would you say then it's how you've managed to use the digital function or being aided by computers to do what you do? Is that what you're saying?
It's actually both. It was the first time I touched the keyboards. I went to Art Center to finish up my graduate studies in design and advertising, and they had the first Macintosh lab in the world. This is back in, I think, '87. Mm-hmm. And my first time I ever touched the keyboards, I just saw that was the future. It was just a question of being able to pull things out of the computer and make it useful for business and for people, for any society. And so that was how I built my company, because nobody could really get anything out of it other than print out, some headlines, black and white headlines. So I created my company, forming it, where I created a film division, a digital photography division, a multimedia division, and we're doing things that nobody was doing, and introduced that to the big companies such as Apple and HBO, Paramount Pictures, all the big giant companies that are always looking for innovative solutions to get their brand ahead of others. And we showed them, hey, we could do something that was more creative, so you could have more eyes on your brand because they've never seen things before, and then do things where it can be more widespread and hit a wider market using technology. And so it was really exciting because it was an untapped industry, and it was kind of like the Wild West. So we helped pioneer, me and other groups that I got to know other people with pioneering, and with that brought together like DVD. We brought out DVDs to the marketplace. We brought out the debit ID card for all school systems. It allowed, and we even created lobbying poster for the World Wide Web. So then people had access to the web rather than just the government and medical use. We used it for so the general public could have a smaller world, you could say, be in touch with more people around the world and shrunk the world in a sense, had more access to the world for personal reasons and for business as well. So that was for me was a critical moment in my career at the very beginning, was being able to adapt to the computer because people were very afraid of it. I introduced it to a lot of companies, and they were very afraid because they're used to doing things traditionally by hand, and they can envision how we could actually make things more efficient, more effective, more powerful, and better solutions. And so the companies that were able to adapt to it, that I showed them, well, they grew a lot bigger.
Wow. What an incredible foresight for you to have had all the way then already. So this ties in so beautifully with the question I wanted to ask you, where you say that you position businesses from their future potential, which is exactly what you were doing here. You saw a future potential that no one else saw, and you kind of you painted the picture in their minds and then brought it together in such a creative fashion. Tell us a little bit more about this powerful insight philosophy that you have around positioning from future potential.
So I always, I guess being a whole brain thinker and thinking from the right hand side is really using imagination. And I love that quote by Einstein, what's more important than knowledge is imagination. And if you think about it, everything around us is created through imagination, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we'd still be trying to use a flint rock to start a fire, right? So it just comes natural to me to see something that people don't see and to be able to see their blind spots. Mm. And so when I look at a company, they're looking usually from where they're at with their business rather than looking at a vision of what they could become. Mm. And when I look at what they could become as far as what they really want to own as themselves in the market share, in a marketplace, and take up more market share in that regards, I could actually see what's the potential and then reverse engineer and turn it into reality, not just dream about it and go, oh, we could do this, this, and this, and then nothing happens, right? There's no execution, because really 90% of things coming in life is execution. But the vision is still extremely important. Doesn't mean even though the vision's only 10% of the equation, doesn't mean it's any less. In fact, actually quite more. It's just making it happen. So integrating my left side of brain and seeing how I could really articulate and reverse engineer things, I could see the path of having that company's vision happen. And then using their resources, their team, our team, and putting together like a whole design of a business from the inside out, either upgrading it or doing makeover from systems, processes, the business model, the brand identity to reach who they ultimately want to reach with their new ideas, or segment. Like they can have one target market they've been after, but then when I look at their business model and see the potential, we could actually then look at it, well, maybe you're missing out on this revenue stream for this type of customer, the way they think or the way they buy. And then you're missing out on the Y generation because it's actually adaptable for them. So I kind of look at looking at the different generations and different mindsets and behaviors. I look at how we could take an idea and then repurpose it for different mindsets, you could say.
Mm. It's such a powerful skill to see that. And do you find often that when you see what you've seen and you see that future potential, the company, the entrepreneur or business owner is actually quite surprised to see the extent of the potential?
They are, and the really smart ones take it on and they just take off. Like the ones that actually have vision themselves, like, because I work with a lot of different types of business owners, of course, and then you got people that are left brain, right brain, very few that are actually, quite balanced. But generally speaking, a lot of them, it's difficult for them to encompass. A lot of them it's difficult to encompass that vision because it's so outside their paradigm. But the funny thing, when I do this exercise, understanding their philosophy, they realize they had that ability and that gift at a younger age. They they got so much into the business, they didn't look at a perspective of working on the business. And they got stuck in the minutia of trying to chase money rather than why they did what they did based on the passion. So once I get every one of my clients, right, no matter how left brain they are, when I get into that state, now they're open. But it takes, quite honestly, maybe, I do these 3 days intensive. It might take a day and a half before they really get turned on. And then they're really excited by the end of the second day. That's the ones that are like, again, real left brainers. The right brainers get it like within the first hour when I'm working with them. Right?
It must be electric. Well, when you get that switch that goes off, it must be just quite intoxicating energy over those 3 days.
Yeah, it is. It really is, because they're able to really understand what's their driving force. And that's what excites me. It's like, they've been doing this for 30, 40, years of business. And they kind of like lost it. And then when I get them back to that state of why they do what they do and why they create what they created, you're right. They just light up like a kid. It's like, oh my goodness. I got all the way back to really, quite honestly, connecting with my soul, connecting with my heart of why I do what I do. But now we have it in place, okay, where now it becomes a clear focus for us to arrive to, and it's written down. So it makes it more tangible rather than just kind of like in the ethers. When we get it written down, the vision statement, I usually carve out to two sentences. The point is, at that point, it becomes very tangible and quote unquote in this reality, you could say, that they could see now that that's possible.
Tell us about this, a little bit more about this revolutionary approach of yours over these 3 days, where you identify, you spoke about the legacy, the DNA, the philosophy, the values. Tell us a little bit more about that, because it sounds like there's a lot of magic in this approach that you use to bring this soul. You actually spoke about the soul to light.
Yeah, no, you're right. So the first day is really working what I call the context of your universe, not the content. This is where a lot of businesses run into trouble, because I consider myself a business strategist, right? A strategic planner. They get into the minutiae, they get into the goals too soon. And now they're just going to create more of what they're creating because they haven't thought bigger yet, right? This is how 90% of companies do it. They hire someone like a business strategist and strategic planner first. They work on the left side of the brain and they drill down, and they might increase, don't get me wrong, they may increase 10 or 20% gain, which is great. But what happened if you increase up to like 2,000%?
I love it.
I have testimonials that show, increase, at least 100%, right? A double fold, right? But what happened if you could do a 10-fold, 100-fold, or 2,000-fold, right? That's a game changer.
Yes,
and
for sure.
That's where you got to start off without any limitations and be really open-minded and look at the context. So yeah, so the first one in this 3-day process, when I do this strategy, which I call a master blueprint, because the master blueprint really is identifying and redesigning or redeveloping or repositioning or enhancing the business model, and then looking at what kind of brand do we want to wrap around that, and then how we want to market the brand. Because most people have things out of order. They come up with the idea and they go straight to the market, but they understood that the brand is the biggest asset they could own. They would actually rethink. of how they approach the marketplace and actually increase their own value of their company. But anyway, so with the 3 days, the first day is really looking at the context of what kind of universe does the founder, CEO, and the group want to create into their future, but not future like 10 years from now, but now in the present. So the way I look at it is like you have the North Pole, which is really looking at the vision, like the legacy you want, the company wants to leave behind. So it's a bigger game than money, because once you attain money, then it's kind of like, well, what's next? Then you run out of, you could say, you know, you run out of the runway. so, so then it's looking at the context of the vision, the legacy you want to leave behind, and then the philosophies, why you're in business to begin with, and what makes you unique in doing what you do. And that comes from the soul. Okay. And then you have the values, which governs the company's culture, so people can feel it from the outside in and really attract the right employees that you want, rather than just having them come to get a paycheck. They actually want to get involved with your company because they believe in the culture, they believe in the philosophy, and they believe in the vision. So they believe in that what you're doing is actually authentic, it's genuine. Okay. Now, with that being said, that's building the context. And then the content now is looking at, well, let's, you know, if it's an existing company, let's look at re-examining the business model, and is it relevant for today's market or for the future markets? Okay. So most companies have a business model that's antiquated, that's actually, you could say, old, without them even knowing it is, because they don't realize all their different applications it could move through the different channels of media, or let's just say technology in general. Okay. So that's where I come in and help innovate that business model so it's a lot more fruitful and creates a lot additional revenue streams as well. They might have been working on one revenue stream, and I'm looking at, okay, with this idea, by the way, we could hit the X generation and Y generation and then really still obtain our, let's say, baby boomers. Okay. So it really opens their eyes to see what's possible and moves their company into being more relevant. And also from the standpoint, it's attracting more customers at the same time. So that's when I start working on the content. So again, starting on their business model. The second thing that I start to look at is, a lot of times, quite honestly, they've been after the wrong customer. I don't care if they've been making hundreds of millions of dollars. A lot of times that their business model, by skewing it, they could attract maybe 2 or 3 sets of new customer, okay, mindsets that they had not been attracting because the way it was positioned. So that's the second component to this, is really understanding their business model and how to make it more fruitful, in a sense, more, well, quite honestly, higher revenues and better profit. Then the second thing that I do is look at, well, now that we have this bigger context and this bigger model that we're working with, why aren't we looking at the brand and repositioning the brand so the brand is actually communicating everything you want it to communicate from the standpoint of the value that you are actually have within the company, but no longer is it going to be hidden, it's going to be exposed in a powerful way. Okay. So that way more people understand what you stand for, what you do, and how you're going to make a difference in their life with your product and service. Okay. So now that we figured out the branding part component of it, as far as you could say the DNA, I call it the DNA. You know, we're not designing logos during this time and coming up with new names, and we're not designing websites, but we're creating the DNA to create these things. Okay. Once then we figure that part out, the third component to this is now understanding how are they going to scale it, and then understanding how we're going to market it. Like what channels are we doing? What media channels are we really going to use? Most companies are totally incorrect as far as the sequence of the steps in creating a brand identity and then looking at how to market with what channels. Like a lot of companies, they might be after baby boomers, but they're doing all this digital marketing, and the best way to reach them is through a postcard, right? Direct mail. right? And then you have the opposite happening too, where they want to reach the X and Y generation, and they're creating things that are really tangible, and people aren't looking at from that perspective and that mindset. They're looking more on their phone, and they want to create an experience on their phone. Okay, quick experience, because they tend to be more short with their attention. So it's really creating an alignment between the business, the brand, and the market. In addition, it's looking at what kind of universe do you want to create. So there's a lot of years that you can build your company and scale it in. Okay. A lot of companies that I meet, I'd say 90% of them, I'm repositioning them because they reached the ceiling and they literally don't know how to grow and forget about scaling, in a sense of being able to really scale. And there is a difference between the two. But the point being is that they're stuck. They're literally stuck and they don't know why. And it's kind of like they're trying to figure it out, like, how if they're trying to examine themselves, like if they're a doctor, right? You need to go to a specialist to be able to assess where the problems are and to hit your blind spots, and then being able to expose those blind spots. So now you could actually make change in those blind spots.
Can I be a fly on the wall in your next session? It sounds intriguing the way you bring it all together. Now I understand why 2000% is like, why go for 20%, even 200%? Let's go for 2000%, because you're creating new universes. It sounds like a fascinating process. I'm sure by the time you're done here, people have fallen in love again with their business and the possibilities.
Exactly.
That's what it's, yeah.
Exactly. And then that's the first phase. The second phase is now building that brand identity to reflect that model, so the values increase and the equities increase instantaneously. Yeah. A lot of times we honestly go through name changes, we create taglines, we redo everything for them. So it's all universal, one look and feel, one brand personality, like their website. Let's say they have storefronts, billboards, radio spots, TV. So it looks like it's one voice, one personality. Okay. So there's continuity, because another key component when it builds a world-class brand, you got to be consistent, but you have to figure out first, what's the DNA to create that consistency? That's why I start off with the 3-day master blueprint, to figure out what is our future and design it now. Okay. So yeah, so then that means that we it's getting the right copy in place, getting the right visuals in place. And this is different than graphic design. I started off in graphic design. Graphic design is extremely important, but we're talking way beyond graphic design. We're talking about all the communication pieces that involve advertising, design, social media, ambassadors. We're talking about storefronts, vehicle wraps, and making sure what I call brand. It's really what I call brand identity systems, brand designing. Graphic design is like one-off, like, okay, I need a website. Great. I hire this designer, 99 Design, what have you, design this website. But how does that fit into the equation of your business? How does that fit in an equation for everything else that needs to align to that, so everything looks the same, so you look professional, you look credible, okay? And these things have been proven through science of how much more gain a company gets when things are consistent. Even the use of color, like what color, the psychology behind color, what's the competitors using, what are you going to use, how are you going to use that, overall in your identity system. Little things like that make a huge, add up to a lot. They add up to quite a bit as far as when it comes to the value and equity of your company's worth.
So Howard, do you only deal with bigger brands, or could you do this whole process for a smaller company, or would the costs involved be prohibitive for a smaller company? What's
Yeah, so the way that I work with all sides. I create a universal model that works for startup companies, companies that are in growth, companies that are scaling, companies that are going through the exit strategy, going through a merger, acquisitions, or going IPO, franchise licensing. And so I create this universal model that works no matter where you're at in the stage of your business, this in the business cycle. I also create a universal model that actually works for whether it's a product, service, or information. I also created this universal model that works for B2C, B2B, and B2G, government, business to government, and everything in between. And it's designed for small businesses to the biggest companies in the world. What I do that how I price it is basically I've been part of AIGA, which has been around since the 70s, but I've been using it since the 80s, is they have a guidebook of ethical guideline to pricing, okay? And just the ethics around design. So we're like priced quite honestly like a B minus. Of course, the work that we do surpasses an A. And then so we basically have it where companies that are under $1 million, we have at one price point between 1 and 10, 10 and 25, 25 to 50, and then 50 million above.
Okay.
And every company, I call myself a big firm, small boutique. So we do everything that the big companies do, but I get involved and become the catalyst between all the different steps. So when it comes to a strategy session, it's not like you're handed down to a manager or a creative director, okay, or project manager. I'm there working with the client to co-create with them. When it comes to the execution, because I understand design, advertising, marketing, PR, and everything else in between, I'm overseen as the art director, creative director, and brand director of my team on pulling it all together. And then on third component, then I actually put people into what I call the executive advisory program, which I call now the executive planning and execution program. And that's where I work with my CEO of companies, my clients one-on-one, where we work every other week for an hour, so twice a month. And then I help them integrate what we've created in the area of business, branding, and marketing so that their team is totally absorbing it, adhering to it, adapting to it, and using it. So that's my overall system of what I created over the last 35 years.
Wow, it's incredible that you are managing to still have feelers in all of that, and that no matter where a company is coming in, whether it's a smaller company or a large brand like Apple, they literally get to touch you at some point. That's really hands-on and so personalized, and which is, I think, part of your game changer difference that you're bringing. You speak about emotional currency. Tell us a little bit about this and why it's so important in terms of a successful brand.
Well, for every buyer, they think first if they like, if they trust, if they don't like, if they distrust a brand. And so the first thing is to engage them emotionally, and that has to do with the overall look and feel and what you're communicating with your brand. Okay. And then how you're positioning yourself in their mind. Like I call it, look at the mind, the brain, and I look at it as real estate. And the brand that takes up the most real estate are the first to be recalled by that individual. And how do you move above all that clutter is that you're able to create a clear message of what you stand for, what the expectations are, and if you deliver on an experience to the consumer. So if you're promising X, Y, Z, like FedEx, has to be positively guaranteed overnight, and if it delivers overnight, you're going to trust that company. If they don't deliver overnight, then actually diminishes the value of that brand because now they can't be trusted. So it's all about how clear you are in your communication, how visible are you being seen. Where most companies copy one another, the best way is to think different and to actually stand out from the clutter. And that's like E-Trade, all the conservative companies in the financial, right? When it came to trading, they're all using blue, they're all using red, right? Very traditional, very safe, very corporate. And they went with purple and green because they knew they were disruptive. They knew they were different, so they better look different.
Yeah.
And the colors resonated with the individual. Or let's say Coca-Cola owns red, Pepsi owns blue in the cola space. Barbie owns that pink, an actual Pantone color they developed for themselves. They keep as their proprietary process because that identifies Barbie, right? So all these things really add up. That's why it goes beyond just graphic design, because you're looking at literally a whole city rather than a single house. You're looking at how everything fits together. The plumbing, the roads, the commercial area, the industrial area, the residential area. How is it all going to work together as a whole ecosystem? Okay. So yeah, so it's really being able to clarify how you want to communicate and strike the emotions first, because we're human, and everybody, you cannot help it. You cannot help judging and evaluating constantly, because that's the human brain. It tells us in an early on sign when we're, primitive, is like, what is fearful? Should we stay away from, a bobcat, right? so, so it's those natural instincts that are buried in every human, well, just about every human, you could say. But the point being is that our emotions are really what's driving us to be like drawn like a magnet or repelled, drawn like a magnet or be repelled. And we use that as our guide, is our emotions.
So you mentioned that there's colors. So how do you build this in terms of this emotional currency? Are you building it through graphics, through color, through messaging? Is it putting all of this together to create emotional currency? Is that
exactly? It's putting all the pieces of the puzzle together to make a clear picture in the consumer's mind.
Okay.
And that's what creates currency. If you think about it, everything's based on emotional currency, and it's the most valuable currency. A lot of people think, well, yeah, the financial currency, don't get me wrong, that's important, but if you don't have people emotionally first, you have no financial currency. Okay. And you're right, it's delivering on that emotional currency that converts to financial currency. So let's say someone goes, okay, I've seen that ad for that jean, Calvin Klein jean, of 50,000 times, right? And they're getting emotionally more connected. And then finally it converts, where they go, that individual goes, oh, I'm in a store, I'm in Macy's, I see the Calvin Klein jean, I'm going to purchase it. Now just converted into an actual financial currency. But it's the emotional currency that actually creates the wave. So if you look at it, every political party is a emotional currency. You take every country is emotional currency. So it just doesn't stop around, you really define branding. Like I was just talking to this guy that supposedly did branding. He said, branding, there won't be any brands in the future. He's totally wrong. It allows us to actually feel like we belong to a group or group of people with same likeness and behaviors and values. But he's thinking of it as just his brand identity, which quite honestly, a lot of people would say they do branding, graphic designers, advertising. That's where they stop. And that's what they think, but it's so much deeper than that.
So I want to get back to the soul part, because I'm seeing that when you get this emotional currency right, you're actually delving deep into the soul of the brand. Right. And let's talk about the entrepreneur. So if this is a owner run company and you're working with the founder, how important is it? Let me just ask this in the best way possible. If you were to compare the owner and what the owner brings in terms of soul, in terms of heart, in terms of who they are, and product and service. Where does the most emotional currency come from, if you were to compare those?
It really comes from, if you're looking at it, the emotional currency comes in a place where you could feel it, like Apple products, okay? It was not based on being cheap. It was based on based on his vision. His vision is basically, I want to have products where they're an extension of the human being. I want it where they're user friendly, where they're intuitive, okay? His also philosophy, coming from design because he studied typography, understood simplicity. So the basic shapes in the universe are triangle, circle, right, in squares. So if you look at Apple, like the iPhone, okay, how radical is that from our traditional mobile phones when we first started off, right? But it's the most basic shape. So he wanted to have, Steve Jobs, super brilliant, one of my, heroes, you could say, aspirations, is really looking at from a standpoint, how is it going to feel emotionally? How are you going to use it? Okay. It wasn't about price point. It was about, like, can we build the best product where people actually feel as an extension of their life? You see that? Whereas the PC world still trying to figure it out, because a lot of times, in my opinion, they don't have a clear philosophy. They're working too much on the left side of the brain, not on the right side of the brain, which is vision and creativity. You see that difference?
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. So he infused, Steve Jobs had this vision, a philosophy that he breathed into his company through products and services.
Right.
Okay.
And here's the critical thing with the emotional thing. Okay, as far as, I remember I brought this up to a gentleman that led a seminar. He said, 10. I said, this is 15 years ago around there. And I said, the future is customization, personalization. Customization, personalization. Steve Jobs, he was the first to figure that out. Okay, in my opinion, when it came to products. Okay, he wanted where you weren't stuck with a particular preference. Okay, or I should say template, where it gave you preferences of that template that you could design it and customize the way you want it to be an extension of your emotions, the way that you feel, the way that you view. Okay. See how that worked? And then I think, and that, if you look at it, everything that's being successful right now that's early adapting or has adapted already, like Netflix, right? And everyone right now is trying to really, quite honestly, is to be the king in the area of entertainment, but it's so fragmented, right? But you got Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu. Guess what they're doing with it versus the cable company? It's all customization. I want to see this show now. I don't want to wait till 5 p.m. on next Thursday. Right? It's about really having the individual be the focal point and in control. Okay. And those are the companies that are starting to accelerate. They're starting to figure this out. Okay. That's what I got when I first used the Macintosh computer, and I started to customize my own computers, pulling off and putting in new motherboards and da. The point being is that the software allowed me to create my way I envisioning things and gave me the tools to do so. And being able to work with other companies to see their vision, interpret their vision, and then being able to execute it, okay, on a computer when I was first starting. So it's so much about, like, what's authentic, what's genuine. By the way, companies that are genuine and authentic, customers trust them. And those are the ones that always pull ahead, by the way. So this all adds up to increasing the value and equity of a company. If you're trusted and if you're delivering on that promise, on that expectation and experience, like restaurants, right? That's how they're able to charge so much, is because they made a name for themselves and a reputation, and they're consistent with that, right? It's like, quite honestly, Henry Ford with the Model T and McDonald's with the assembly line, taking that assembly line idea and making consistent burgers, no matter where you're at, in part of the country, you're going to get that hamburger. It's going to taste similar in your hometown, right? When it comes to the franchise. So the customization, that's what happened, by the way. Remember Burger King, have it my way? Remember they're the first burger. So companies that start picking up on that are the ones that are really going to pull ahead with their services, with their products, with their information.
This is really good. It's really good. I'm like holding on to every single word there because there's just so much wisdom and comes decades and decades of you infusing yourself in this stuff. And for those our audience out there, please like this if you like it, and you're finding value in it, because there's this is it's wisdom that comes only from experience and being in the trenches, and that's what's amazing. Thank you, Howard. Tell us or share with us a philosophy, a powerful success secret, insight, mantra. We talk about whiz bombs on this show. So, drop us one of your whiz bombs in the form of a mantra or insight.
Yeah, sure. So one of the, first of all, I don't live my life for me. It comes from, whether you're religious or non-religious, doesn't matter, source, you call it source, God, spirit. So it's like the difference I want to make. And the more that it's like, for me, it's about impacting as many businesses as possible. And that's why I also speak and why I'm on your show, is to share what's possible and to elevate humanity. Right now, it feels like the standards are dropping everywhere rather than looking at how can we elevate and inspire people. And one of the reasons why I do what I love to do with businesses is because I believe in a strong economy. When we have a strong economy, people are happier. It's just nature, right? When you have $100 in a bank account versus $1,000, you better believe it. It's going to make a difference on how you feel energetically, right? Are you in survivor mode or are you in thriving mode? And it's like, why not have the whole world feel good and everything, right? And and money is just energy. So why not have the people that want to do good with money do more good with money, and businesses that want to do good have them do more good. So that's my thing, is like, I want to empower and I want to enrich companies that have something they want to share with the world, and that they could create revenue from it, and then they could do more good, whether hiring more employees, whether giving to nonprofits, okay? So whatever fills them up, okay? I believe in, it was told to me from Bernie Dorman, you learn and you earn and then you return. So I believe in that philosophy.
You said you learn, you earn, and you return.
Yep.
Lovely.
Yep. Yeah, and it makes perfect sense. And so you look at the biggest, a lot of people that are doing a lot of good, have a lot of money, they keep wanting to do more good and more good and more good. And I think that's amazing because it takes money. You can't help. Right now, we're living in a currency where money is still the dominant way as far as finances, right? And so why not take the good from that and leverage it?
Yeah, for sure. So you're exposed to so many different brands around the world, and you see business from so many different perspectives. And you tend to look into the future as well. So from your perspective, Howard, what would you say is one of the most terrifying things you foresee coming that we need to mitigate? And then also one of the most exciting things coming that we'd want to take advantage of?
I think one of the more fearful thing is figuring out what to believe on news, on the media. because it seems like everyone's using it for their own positioning, their own interests. And it's so rare to get things just whether it doesn't matter if it's left or right. It's just like getting news for news, on the standpoint of fact. I remember listening to Dan Rather and Walter Cronkite. Oh, they're awesome. It's like you got me delivered. They deliver the news. And now it just seems like there's so much agenda, political agenda. And it doesn't matter, again, if it's right or left side. It's just, I want just to listen to what's going on factually.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of confusion, quite honestly, a lot of confusion. And then you got people that are influencers, and some of them, are very truthful what they say, and some of them just want the likes. So they sensationalize just like the news, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the media itself, having social media has made it more accessible, of course, because in the past you had the big free TV, radio, and print. You really only had 3 channels, right? ABC, NBC, CBS. And it took a lot to get on those. But now you pick up, microphone and whatever and get on, social media and create your own channel, which is fabulous, which I think is awesome. That has allowed everybody to have a voice, but unfortunately, it's a lot of it, in my opinion, a lot of it is for self-interest and propaganda.
Yeah.
So sure. That's the one thing is what is the truth? Just even COVID, you got so many things talking about, hey, this is what's happening. No, this is what's happening. No, this is what's happening. It's like, and they're all, let's say they're all doctors, but it's like, well, what's the truth, right? So that's the big thing for me. The uplifting thing is what I see, which I think is really cool, is is energy, is like being able to have energy for everyone. I think that, solar has been great, but we still need oil. And this is a misnomer, because I have a client, it's in oil, and we need oil to build everything. We need the oil to produce the batteries that go into the electric cars. We need the oils that go into producing all the makeup, so but the point being is that I think the energies and the technologies and assist where we don't need as much energy, oil, to produce energy, to produce these alternative energy solutions, right? And that means batteries. I'm talking specifically about batteries. And I think they're gonna figure out a way where, one is that we don't end up with these huge landfills, because the source of energy and how to produce is gonna be different than what we're all thinking. And it's going to be totally sustainable, that you never have to throw away that battery. Okay. And then and so that way everybody could be self-sufficient. And we're talking about globally. Okay. We're talking about globally, because that energy everyone needs to survive and to thrive. Okay. I just know, because we have rolling blackouts here, because I live in an area where there's a lot of fires, right? And so they cut off your energy, and you're just like stuck unless you have a battery backup, right? It's tied into solar. But not everybody could afford that. So what happens to all those people that don't get that, and all their food rots, for example, in the refrigerator?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyways, I think what's really exciting is, in my opinion, is going to be batteries being fuel charged in new ways that we had not thought of, so we could be more self-sufficient, and have people where they don't have to suffer so much around the world.
That's a really fascinating, exciting insight there, how it's so different to what it's always interesting when you hear the answers to these questions, because everybody comes with something so unique and so different. And it's so if you liked what Howard was saying, or find that fascinating too, I'd love to hear comments around this concept that he's brought up. What would you say right now in this radical phase of disruption that's probably going to continue for quite a long time. What would your advice be to entrepreneurs to, on the one hand, if you're still doing this, stop. Stop doing this. And on the other hand, if you're not yet doing this, you want to start. What would be those things? The stop at the start for you to really thrive now and going forward?
Well, to really thrive and go forward is to look at, like I love going to trade events. You get a lot of great fresh material, what's going on in every industry. And so, I attend, of course, the marketing, advertising, but then I speak at a lot of different industries, like let's say it's automotive or let's say it's furniture. It's just interesting with, again, the aid of technology, how much things are shifting. So if you're an entrepreneur, business owner, I always encourage you to go to trade events in your industry or even not in your industry, just to see what the latest trends are occurring and why they're occurring the way that they're occurring. So because usually a trend, it's taking shorter for a trend to catch up, to be adaptable, but at least you're seeing how you might want to shift your position, okay? Okay, when I hear pivot, because that's been a common word lately, I don't see it as so much pivoting, I see it as more shifting. Pivot's like a 180, right? Shifting is like maybe 2 to 3 degrees, but still keeping you could say, the business model that you have, but allowing it so it's more adaptable for future usage from your clients or from future potential new segment of clients or customers for that matter. So, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, just in the sense of transportation, what's happening in transportation with, self-driving cars, smart homes that are taking place, And again, when I talk about energy being battery, it may not even be known as it'll probably be a new category, which is not even a battery, by the way, but something that's so efficient. But the point being is, it's always great to see what the latest in the industry are occurring with the top performers and the leading companies, and go to trade events, enrich yourself at least 3 to 4 times a year to trade events. So that way you're not stuck in your own bubble, but you're again exposed to what's going on all over the globe in your industry.
So that's the start. What would you say to stop doing? If you're still doing this, you got to stop. What would you?
I would say the thing to really stop is to stop just doing things because they're trendy rather than not like a trend. In other words, stop using social media if you don't know how to use it properly, because it could actually damage your brand, because it can be totally outside of what your brand really stands for, because you haven't gotten to its DNA. So I see a lot of companies are doing all the social media or design that has nothing to do with who they are, and it's actually causing more harm than good. So you need to stop. You need to stop sending messages out there without understanding what is your core message. Okay.
Sure. That's getting into the depth, like you said right at the beginning, of who you are, what your philosophy is, what is that DNA. We've got to think about these things and bring it all together in this sort of captivating way that creates the emotional currency.
Exactly, because you don't keep tracking the wrong customers. To put it that simply. There's companies that I work with that have been tracking the wrong customers for 25 years, another one for 40 years, another one for 2 generations.
Oh, wow.
And after we reposition them, right? And now they're attracting exactly who they want to attract. One company, he wanted to sell his company. Once he did it tenfold, he did it in 5.5 years, and he sold the company. So you need to really figure out, and it's not easy. You got to really figure out who you are, like your brand, and it's like figuring out who you are as an individual. So it takes work, It takes like I always, it's that deep work that allows you to be more clear and
Yeah.
focused.
Absolutely. Well, that's why we have people like you in the world, Howard, to help us figure out who we are and do the deep work, because it's not easy. It's not easy to know exactly. We think we know who we are. We think we know what we want to bring to the world, but sometimes we can't see it ourselves, and we need.
Exactly. But once that's done now, your trajectory, the way that you project and the path that you're on now, the new trajectory, it's gonna be so much more satisfying all the way around. Okay. Financially, emotionally, personally, spiritually, like the whole 9 yards. So once you change that and define it and you change its trajectory, you're gonna get where you want to go a lot faster. Like it's gonna be like catapult.
Howard, how much of what we've spoken about is in your book? Do you touch on a lot of these concepts in your
Yeah,
book?
yeah, I do. My book called Authentic Branding. It's found on Amazon. Yes, it's
Okay.
yeah. When I created that book, there was only a couple books on branding, and nobody was showing you how to do it. They talked about it, theory, but nobody was showing based on their experience of how they were able to alter companies. So yeah, in that book, I give out like many exercises. In each chapter, there's an exercise to examine your own company. And in fact, I had several people when I spoke at seminars and events, when they bought my book, they said, "Oh my God, I just developed my whole company just reading the book," because they had guidance now. Okay, and there's exercises and the tools to at least get them to a place more professional than where they were if they were trying to do it on their own.
Fantastic. I'll drop that, the link in the show notes, because I think that a lot of people, once they've seen this episode, they're going to want to read that book. Howard, thank you so much. Is there one last thought that you would love to share with our audience in terms of maybe getting into this soulish part of business?
Well, every time there's a crisis, this has been true for me and other people I know. There's the greatest opportunities too. Most companies tend to shrink during a crisis, which is understandable. But if you have a clear vision, it's a time to pull ahead with your vision. Because most people are shrinking, that there's so much more space in the marketplace. And the more space there is, if you're clear on your position, you're clear on your brand, the more you could have a bigger impact in the mind of the consumer of what you stand for, because you could say the airways have been cleared out.
What a wonderful way to close this time that we spent together. And yeah, I love the picture you created, because you don't think of a crisis like that. So in a time of crisis, people are shrinking back and actually creating a space for us to fill.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Exactly. Things to emerge right now, things to emerge or to reemerge or just to grow further. So you're exactly right, because, and that's the beauty. I mean, that's the beauty during a crisis. There's a lot of there's a lot of, negative things that happen. Don't get me wrong, but if you really look at it from a glass half full, there's so many opportunities. It's crazy.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's where my company starts to look at pulling ahead. I mean, I created my company during the recession in '87 for that reason, But anyways, that's what I have to leave behind. It's like, it's a time to think bigger during a time of crisis.
Thank you. It's been a special treat to have you on the show, Howard, and I absolutely know our audience would have loved this time with you as well. So thank you for being here and sharing your nuggets of gold, game changer gold with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate that.
It's a pleasure, and we appreciate you too for listening, for watching, and I want to reiterate what Howard's ended on there. It's right now is not a time to shrink. It's not a time to go in. It's actually a time to expand. It's a time to truly find what your heart and soul is called to do, and to find that vision and to create our own universe and to expand into it. So I appreciate you. Thank you for being here with us, and subscribe, like, help me grow the channel so more people can hear these incredible insights. And I look forward to seeing you again. Until then, sending you oceans of love.